Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary, Great Leadership Across 5,000 Years of Our People, Seen Through Proverbs' Wisdom, Public Righteousness, Justice, Peace, and Integrity, Key Viewing Points for the June 3rd local elections. There are many ways to evaluate a great leader. In this commentary, the focus is on 5 sequential criteria found in the book of Proverbs: wisdom, public righteousness, justice, peace, and integrity. The final criterion, integrity, is not something that appears at the beginning. It becomes possible only when the first 4 requirements are fully satisfied. In politics, people speak of integrity far too easily, but integrity is never a starting point. Integrity is consistency of thought, speech, and action, and such consistency becomes possible only when credibility is first anchored in direction and standards. A person whose words merely match each other without standards is not necessarily honest. That person may simply be stubborn. If someone pushes only personal beliefs without public righteousness, which is the justice of the entire community, that is not justice, but self-righteous arrogance. If someone talks about peace without the justice of sweat and work, that peace becomes free peace, and in the end it turns into hypocrisy that shifts responsibility onto others. Therefore, great leadership is both an ability and a character with an order. It begins with wisdom, passes through public righteousness, justice, and peace, and reaches integrity only at the end, in the order of Proverbs. In other words, integrity is a dignity and a high adversity index that cannot be achieved without deep professionalism and credibility. To diagnose this, 8 of the most symbolically great figures in our 5,000-year history are selected: King Gwanggaeto, General Yeon Gaesomun, General Gang Gamchan, King Sejong, Admiral Yi Sun-sin, Dasanjong Yakyong, Tuegye Yi Hwang, and Yulgok Yi Pwai. The purpose of this diagnosis is not to praise individuals, but to propose a verification standard, common sense, and a national benchmark for selecting new leaders for the future Republic of Korea. The more politics shakes under emotion and faction, the more citizens must hold a clear standard for judging leaders. The standard is the 5 criteria: wisdom, public righteousness, justice, peace, and integrity. And what matters even more is that these criteria are connected in a strict sequence. The moment that sequence is ignored and integrity is placed at the front, integrity collapses from the language of morality into a tool of agitation. The 5 criteria, wisdom, public righteousness, justice, peace, and integrity, form a causal chain with an order. Wisdom conceptually is the ability that surpasses data, information, and knowledge. Wisdom is the ability to discern what is essential, to design institutions and allocate resources for the survival and prosperity of the community, and to connect design to performance. A leader without wisdom loses direction even while collecting numbers, and cannot save reality even while speaking knowledge. Wisdom is a higher order capability that integrates strategy, administration, education, and technology to preserve and strengthen the nation. Public righteousness is the justice of the entire community. It is the operating principle that applies rules equally beyond my side and your side, minimizes privilege and exceptions, and increases predictability. When public righteousness stands, citizens trust rules and cooperate. When it collapses, citizens try to survive through shortcuts and evasions. Public righteousness is the backbone of social trust and the core mechanism that reduces the nation's transaction costs. Justice is sweating and working. Justice is not declaration but execution. It is the ethic of action that takes responsibility so the community can function, and that works in reality to produce results. A just leader does not end with words, but solves problems on the ground and does not let go until outcomes are achieved. Justice is the power that cuts off laziness and irresponsibility and establishes the community's productivity. Peace means that all members live in harmony. Peace is not the absence of conflict, It is a condition in which trust, rules and safety remain intact so that the community does not explode even when conflict exists. Harmony does not come for free. When public righteousness sets the rules and justice produces results through sweat and work, members doubt one another less and can move forward together. Peace is the outcome of community governance and evidence of leadership quality. Integrity means consistency of thought, speech, and action. Integrity does not end with merely speaking facts. It is a state in which the direction of responsibility does not shake, and in which private interests are prevented from infiltrating the public good. Yet integrity is the final stage. Consistency without wisdom is dangerous. Consistency without public righteousness becomes factional division. Consistency without justice becomes empty talk. And consistency without peace becomes a belief that tears the community apart. Anyone who speaks of integrity carelessly distorts God's providence, and only after passing the 4-stage performance test does a person earn the right to speak of integrity. King Gwanggaeto represents expansive leadership that set direction through wisdom and built a framework for peace. His strength is wisdom. He expanded the nation's survival space, not from the perspective of short-term battles, but from the perspective of long-term order, and he did not see external threats only as war, but as a structure of relationships and power. Because wisdom set the direction, community cohesion was maintained, and trust and mobilization, the minimum conditions for public righteousness to function, became possible. From the standpoint of justice as sweat and work, he can be evaluated as a leader who executed responsibilities from the throne and delivered outcomes. Peace is not simply not fighting. Peace exists when an order is built that deters invasion, and King Gwanggaeto built such an order. Integrity is difficult to verify directly through modern record systems, but the fact that the chain from wisdom to peace worked becomes evidence of consistency. General Yeon Gae-somun possessed strong deterrence for peace, but weaknesses in public righteousness limited integrity. He displayed determination that did not retreat before external pressure, and he held deterrent leadership that enabled the state to endure in wartime tension. One axis of peace is deterrence. Without deterrence, harmony ends as a prayer, and reality becomes invasion and plunder. Yet there are clear structural limits under the criterion of public righteousness. If the justice of the entire community does not stand on procedures and equal application of rules, determination damages social trust and leaves internal division. If justice is defined as sweaty execution, he was a powerful executor, but the key dispute is whether that execution rested stably on public righteousness for the whole community. When public righteousness is weak, peace cannot last long, and integrity is misunderstood not as the community's consistency, but as the power's self-justification. General Gang Gamcheon represents balanced leadership, in which wisdom integrates public righteousness and justice to produce peace. The combination of wisdom and justice is clear. He read the situation accurately, designed a structure of victory with limited resources, and connected victory not to battle alone, but to stable order. Public righteousness appears in the attitude of returning the fruits of victory to the community's survival rather than turning them into the privilege of a particular group. Justice is confirmed not as declaration but as sweaty execution, and when a commander solves problems and produces results in reality, the community can lay down anxiety. As a result, peace appears not as sentimental harmony, but as a condition in which members trust one another and recover daily life. Integrity is proven not by propaganda, but by the trajectory of consistently fulfilling responsibility in crisis. King Sejong represents national management leadership that institutionalized public righteousness through wisdom and fixed justice through execution. He embodied wisdom as the design of national capability. Wisdom is not increasing knowledge, but building a structure that enables the entire community to become smarter, and King Sejong built that structure. Public righteousness, as the justice of the whole community, was strengthened by opening pathways for citizens to communicate with the state and by increasing predictability of rules. Justice is sweaty execution, and his governance was not slogans but labor, policy, institutions, and talent management. Peace is not merely the absence of war, but the stable functioning of society, and he strengthened the foundation for long-term stability by raising internal capability. Integrity appeared not as stubbornness, but as consistency in a direction that saved and strengthened the community. General Yi Sun-sin represents field leadership, in which the labor of justice and the deterrence of peace are carried through to integrity. He becomes clearest when justice is defined as sweating and working. He did not move the organization by words, but took responsibility on the ground and executed until results were achieved. Wisdom, which surpasses data, information, and knowledge, lay in designing conditions of victory with limited resources, preserving fighting power, and choosing the moment of decisive engagement. Public righteousness, as the justice of the whole community, appears in the attitude of viewing the people and soldiers not as consumables, but as those to be protected. Peace is not submission but deterrence, and he created the conditions for peace through realistic operations such as controlling the sea and cutting supply lines. Integrity is consistency of thought, speech, and action, and it is proven through unwavering consistency in public responsibility. Dasanjong Yakyong represents institutional design leadership that used wisdom to design public righteousness and attempted to fix justice as a manual. His wisdom moves beyond knowledge into institutional design. He did not speak of suffering only with emotion, but decomposed and reassembled the structures of why administration, justice, and livelihoods collapse. Public righteousness is the justice of the entire community, and he made clear that it must be implemented not as private virtue but as procedures and standards. Justice is sweaty execution, and he sought to institutionalize working justice by leaving norms that could be executed immediately on the ground. Peace is community harmony, and because harmony cannot be maintained in internal unfairness and irresponsibility, his prescriptions function as a foundation that prevents internal collapse. Integrity is the final stage, and he sought to implement integrity as a system that reduces the space for false reporting and private interest to intrude. Tugi Huang represents benchmark leadership that built an inner foundation of public righteousness and integrity and blocked the contamination of leadership. He did not design wartime deterrence, but he precisely diagnosed where leadership contamination begins. Wisdom is the ability beyond data and knowledge, and Togi's wisdom is shown in his insight into how human desire and the temptations of power destroy a community. Public righteousness is the justice of the whole community, and he placed it before institutions on the foundation of restraint and self-control. Justice is sweaty execution, and his justice appeared as invisible labor, building standards through study and cultivation, and compelling rulers to follow those standards. Peace is the harmony of members, and because harmony collapses when a leader's inner life is shaken, he contributed by establishing moral foundations. Integrity is the final stage, and he demanded most strictly that integrity is not a declaration, but consistency of character and responsibility. Yulgok Yi Ai represents preventive leadership that recognized risk in advance through wisdom and implemented peace through preparation. His wisdom appears in the ability to foresee national risk and demand preparedness. Wisdom surpasses data, information, and knowledge, and he spoke ahead of time about what causes a nation to collapse and what must be prepared. Public righteousness is the justice of the whole community, and he showed the perspective that the cost and responsibility required for survival must not be evaded. Justice is sweaty execution, and reorganizing institutions, talent, and finances in peacetime is the hardest labor. But without this labor, the nation repays in blood during wartime. Peace is communal harmony, and under severe external threats, harmony can be maintained only when there is prepared deterrence and firm internal order. Integrity is the final stage, And the very attitude of calling risk risk rather than covering reality with pleasant words is evidence of integrity. The future model of great leadership for the Republic of Korea is a systematic all-direction leadership, an eight-sided beauty of leadership that places integrity at the end. A future great leader must design direction with wisdom, set rules for the whole community with public righteousness, work and execute with justice to produce results, maintain harmony among members through peace, and finally reach integrity that consistently carries all of these through. Integrity is not the easiest word, but the heaviest outcome, and integrity that has not passed through wisdom, public righteousness, justice, and peace is not integrity, but either a display of belief or hypocrisy. The great eight-sided beauty leadership of Korea must secure diverse expertise across politics, economy, society, culture, science and technology, and national defense, and must be a leader trusted by many citizens. Citizens must first examine whether a candidate has the design of wisdom, the equal rules of public righteousness, the labor of justice, and the ability to create harmony through peace. Only after these four stages are confirmed should integrity be evaluated as the final step. Only by choosing a truly integrous candidate can Korea have a future. Can Korea have a future by electing someone with a criminal record of fraud and corruption? Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary.